Great. And folks, you will be prompted to hit the continue button here to consent to being recorded. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to We Need to Talk. Before we get started, I'm going to just cover a couple of housekeeping items. Tonight's event is going to be highly interactive, or we would encourage it to be interactive, and you'll be encouraged to engage with us on a regular basis. However, we would just ask that when you're not talking, please be sure to mute your microphone. And you are on mute if your microphone has a line through it, like on the screen here. You are welcome to appear on or off camera, but again, please know that we are recording today's presentation. So if you don't want your video camera on, you can click the video camera icon to ensure that there is a line through that as well. In addition to having the option of speaking, you may also use the chat box to engage with us, which can be accessed by clicking the chat button and typing your questions or comments where it says type message here. One of our volunteers, Iris, will be monitoring the chat and raising your questions or comments throughout the program to the subject we are talking about. Otherwise, we may wait to the end to bring up your comments or questions. Finally, we would encourage you to rename yourself so that we recognize you in the chat. You can do this by moving your cursor into the upper right-hand corner of your own image and clicking on the three dots and then clicking rename, and just your first name is fine. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Iris, who is going to introduce our speaker for this evening. Iris, over to you.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation of We Need to Talk. My name is Iris Altilio. I'm the chat moderator for this program, but I also have the important role of introducing our speaker. Charlie Zoeller is a longtime AARP member and volunteer with the New Hampshire chapter of AARP. He joined the Driver Safety Program as a We Need to Talk program facilitator in 2015. Charlie is retired from a career in elder care, serving in administrative and program leadership roles in residential care and nursing homes and specializing in Alzheimer's. He also worked as the New Hampshire Associate Program Director for the Alzheimer's Association, as a support group leader, and in private geriatric care management. In each of these positions, Charlie has made many presentations, as well as had many one-on-one conversations with family members on the topic of safe driving challenges for the elderly. Charlie and his wife Florence have lived in Derry, New Hampshire since 1986. They've been married for 49 years, have 2 adult children, and 1 granddaughter. Charlie is active in local and state civic, cultural, charitable, and political affairs, including with AARP, community caregivers, the Alzheimer's Association, the New Hampshire Humanities Connection Program, and Derry Parks and Rec. Charlie, welcome. And thank you for being with us this evening, and take it away.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy this opportunity. I appreciate being part of AARP and being part of this program. As Iris said, I've had the experience of many one-to-one conversations with family members around this topic of driving, and so glad to see this AARP program develop and offered. I'll be making a presentation from the slides and program developed by AARP, Driver Safety, and the Hartford Insurance Company. One of the materials that was sent out to you in advance is a booklet published by the Hartford called We Need to Talk, Conversations with Older Drivers. So this presentation is based partly on that and some materials from actually the MIT, from MIT.
Charlie, you somehow ended up on mute.
How much did I miss? Did you miss?
Developed by AARP and the MIT.
Okay, and this program is not the AARP Driver Safety course. If that's what you're looking for, this is not the place. This program was designed specifically with the goal of helping someone, could be yourself, a loved one, a friend, a neighbor, about whose safe driving you have a concern, and to help you understand how to decide whether that safety concern warrants any changes in driving, and then to help you develop some strategies to address a conversation with that person, a sensitive, successful, effective one that will help them make any necessary changes that might have to be made. So we will proceed on that basis, assuming that you are at the program that you want it to be, or that even if it is a surprise, you think you might find it helpful for yourself or someone else at some point. So as was said a few minutes ago, this will be a somewhat interactive program. This is the first time I've done it through Zoom. I've had many meetings like this with people around the room where you can sit and exchange topics, exchange conversation, questions and answers. It's a little bit more difficult in this format, and I'm not sure how long the presentation is going to take in this format. So I'm going to go through it pretty much. I might ask you questions, but we won't have time to have everybody answer. But I will also be asking you to look at some of the handouts that were sent out in advance. If you had a chance to look at them and print them, all the better. But if you have not, Jeannie from AARP staff will put them on the screen so we can be looking at them together. So with that as an introduction, let us go forward to the first slide in the program. Okay, we're calling this is our seminar workshop format. 4 parts. The meaning of driving. You say, what do we mean by the meaning of driving? Well, we'll see. Observing driving, the importance of observations to determine whether someone's driving is safe or not. Crucial, the third part, planning conversations. And that's essential if you have a concern about someone and you're not sure how to have a conversation that will be received well and result in the appropriate changes in driving based on the safety issues. And then finally, last but not least, planning alternative transportation. If there is a concern for someone's safe driving, then you must plan in advance to have some answers to the question, well, how do I get there from here? Okay, so those are the 4 parts that we're going to go through. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as part of the conversation about the meaning of driving, question comes up, what would you do if you didn't have a car? Well, I usually ask this when I'm meeting with people in a room, but I know you didn't need a car to get to this one unless you're visiting somebody today, everybody. But what would you do if you didn't have a car to get to the places that you still need to go to? That's an issue for you. That's an issue for everybody that drives. Giving up the car for even a short time is certainly different from never driving again. And all too often when the subject of safe driving comes up with an elder, the back goes up, the fear goes up. You mean I can't drive anymore? Well, this, and we know that's not true. People do give up driving for a short period of time for various reasons. But too often the fear is out there that when you raise the question, the keys are going to be taken away. Also, adult drivers face decisions about how to change their driving habits. They often do that. They do it on their own. Sometimes they do it with pressure, but however it happens, typically it's an emotional experience because there's a lot of personal angst and investment in driving. Okay, let's go to the next one. If people are asked to either give up driving or limit driving severely, what's a typical or normal reaction? They'll be depressed, especially if they live alone. How am I going to get from point A to point B? They might be angry at you if you're the messenger, angry at themselves, maybe for not doing something about it on their own and having somebody else bring it to their attention. They might be angry and feel and become socially isolated, or be afraid of becoming socially isolated. So, as it says at the bottom banner on this slide, limiting someone's driving should only happen with valid safety concerns. And we'll get on in a few minutes to talk about how do you know if there's a valid safety concern. Okay, next one. Okay, we're going to hear from a couple of people twice, this lady twice on this slide. If we can play that, Jeannie.
I've always been a good driver. I've been driving for about 60 years. It's a part of who I am.
Well, you may have heard this already. This is something that somebody would typically say if you are the one that has raised the question about their driving safety. How do you answer that? Well, as the top of the slide says, try to ferret out the negative aspects of it. This is defensiveness. How are you going to take my car away? And try to find some positive way of addressing that comment. And it might be, well, we're all concerned about you, Mom or Sister dear. Let's at least talk about this. Let's find some way that we can make sure everybody's safe, you and the rest of us. And you might think of another way to make that positive. Let's listen to her second comment.
I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, but I can't do that if I can't drive. I'd be a prisoner in my home.
Ah, that's those fears. So here's the fear, not being able to do what, to get out and go where you want to go when you want to, be a prisoner. Obviously fear is there. How can you respond to that? Think about it for a second. What might you say? Maybe say, well, I won't let you be a prisoner. I'm around, or I can find some help for you. We can work that out. So looking to find something positive to say without denying the reality of the fear. Okay, next one.
I've always...
Now, what about your emotions? What if you're the messenger? How might you feel? Well, let's say you're the adult child nearby, or the spouse, and you wish someone else was this messenger. Three other people in the family say, you got to talk to Dad about his driving. You might be angry that they're putting it on you to be the messenger. You might be frustrated because you've tried 3, 4, 5, 6 times to say something to Mom or Dad or your sister or your brother. And you're getting frustrated more and more every time you get rebuffed. You might feel guilty. Maybe there's been an accident and you wished you had said something sooner. I wished I had when my father had his accident. I was frustrated because many times myself and other family members tried to get him to stop driving. Fortunately, the accident he had was not a serious accident, personal injury wise for him or anybody else, but it did mess up the car pretty badly. So there's a number of reasons that you might have to resist or find it difficult to have that conversation. But the important thing is to have a plan, to have observations, and to try to diffuse any negative emotions with some positive ones, and as well as find some support so you don't feel like you're the only one out there trying to help. Okay, let's go to the next one. So here's an important axiom. Have conversations before offering solutions. And that's conversations with other family members, others who know the driver. and a conversation with the driver in question, yourself and with others, before coming up with solutions, so that you can avert the knee-jerk reaction of anger at when somebody feels threatened that you were going to take their car keys away. Okay, let us put up the handout, please, Jeannie, for the meaning of driving. And if those of you who have that in front of you, you may have already looked at it. Let's see, here we go. Can you make that a little smaller? Yeah, so we can see more of it. That's good. Okay, well, let's look at this. Let's look at this sheet. It's two sections, A and B. The first part is reinforcing the importance of acknowledging feelings. Driving means something to everybody. It means something, even if you haven't thought about it. If you're still a driver, have been a driver for years, you know that driving has meaning to you. You have feelings about driving. And when you have positive feelings about something, then you naturally feel loss if you're going to lose that. So an important part of planning a conversation is letting the person you're going to communicate with about it, knowing that you understand, and you're trying to understand what driving means to them. And that it's more than just getting from, it's probably a lot more than just getting from one place to another. And that the idea of having a conversation is to seek solutions that address the underlying needs, not just the transportation issues. So conversations like that, open-ended conversations, if there's nothing urgent, can plant the seeds for a more meaningful and effective conversation. So now look at part B. These are some categories of examples of attitudes people might have, all of us, you and I, about what driving means to us in the first column, and then some suggestions. And because of time and because you have this material in front of you, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about each of these, but just to give you an idea how one might approach this addressing the meaning of driving. And you can discover this by reflecting on it and having known a person, depending on how well and how long you've known them. It may be a topic of conversation at some point. Again, usually, ideally, in a situation where there's not an urgent need to change driving drastically or take away the keys. Ideally, if there is not an urgency, you will have a little time to explore these in a conversation with someone. It's not only a way to get from one place to another. But if that's a primary need, and it would be for most people, but maybe not all, because they may have a spouse that drives. But if for them, that's their only way to get from one place to another, they live where there's not public transportation, they don't have family around, then focusing on arranging transportation is going to be very important. If it's status and identity, having a car, and this, I can relate to this from my father, owning a car and having it available can be more important than driving it. My father kept the damaged car in his garage for several years after he stopped driving. It was a bit of a status symbol. He felt embarrassed at first to be selling the car or giving it up. Another meaning of driving, freedom and spontaneity, like the woman said in the previous slide, having the ability to get from one place to another when she wanted to go. So one way that can be addressed is discussing making arrangements, helping a person make arrangements for scheduled trips, as well as maybe having somebody on call occasionally for a spontaneous trip. Sense of self-worth, number 4. Person may feel a sense of their own value to their family, to their spouse, to their neighbors, just by being the driver, the designated driver. And without that, that might diminish their sense of dignity. So the thing that's suggested here, this is a little bit harder to do, but give it some thought. Focusing on positive personal qualities the person has to reinforce that that they may not feel, but that their self-worth is based more on their being the driver in the family. Maybe it's their being a loving grandparent, or a good teacher, or a good musician or artist, something that establishes their worth in your mind, to reinforce any diminishment of self-worth by losing the car to drive. Desire to help others. A lot of people put in volunteer time. And if they feel they can't do that, that also diminishes their self-worth. So maybe finding other ways of helping them provide assistance. It could be watching the grandchildren. It could be helping them get to the place where they can still do the things that they did without themselves having to drive there. So that's the way to use this sheet as you think about driving. Think about having a conversation with someone about potentially changing their driving habits, getting to know what the driving means to them. And obviously it can be more than one of these things, or some other things that you may think of. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Back to the slides. Okay, we're going to watch a video here, and your task is to think about how this conversation went and how you think it might, if you think it went well, or you think it might be done differently in your situation. Go ahead, Jeannie. Thank you.
Hey, so Dad, how you been feeling since the accident?
Fine.
You mean physically? What about emotionally? I mean, are you still shaken up?
I'm shaken up. I'm worried it's going to happen again.
You don't need to worry. I've been driving for over 60 years.
Yeah, but accidents can happen to anyone. And you still didn't answer Dave's question. How were you feeling emotionally?
Not great. I hate feeling a little bit out of control.
Well, you know, Dad, we could all use a refresher from time to time. You know, maybe we can find a driver refresher course for you and Mom to go to. You know, we can even help find another way for you to get around, you know, like the bus, or a ride service like Lyft or Uber.
Good.
Okay. So think, what would you, how did you think that went? If anybody wants to answer, you can unmute yourself. Was that that's something you think you'd love for it to go that way with somebody you're talking with about safe driving? They certainly followed some of the principles that were discussed. They certainly realized that they wanted to try to fill in something for him, and he did throw up a little obstacle at the beginning, but I think they provide a kind of a good model of some of those principles. Okay, let us go on to the next slide. Then this will be a summary of the meaning of driving section. The first panel there discusses the various meanings that we just referred to on that handout. also refers to, in the second panel, you may yourself have strong emotions. That may slow you down, give you pause, and encourage you need to prepare to be calm in case there are hot emotions when you raise the subject, and to try and to recognize, knowing the person you're talking with, if that's likely to happen. And the likelihood of some conflict in raising the subject of driving may depend a lot on your personal relationship, the order in the family, past history. So it's not going to be the same thing for everybody, but to think about and be prepared for the reaction that's most likely given your relationship. And then the last one, try to remember to use empathy when in relation to the feelings that this person has. Saying, I know, I understand, I'm sure this is difficult for you, it would be for me, but we can face this together, you're not in this alone, and we realize that driving is important to you. That's some of the principles of the notion of preparing for a discussion by looking at emotions and also the meaning of driving for everybody. Okay, now we will go on to part 2. And that is to address the question, how do we know the driver in question is unsafe? Well, have they had 1 accident, 2 accidents, 3 accidents? Have we seen them violating traffic laws? Then we probably know. But in most cases, we might not have quite that much information yet. Most older drivers, in fact, are safe drivers. That's statistically true. And most, we understand again from studies, social studies, that many older drivers begin to modify their driving before it gets risky. If I was in a room with people such as yourselves attending this, I would have a better idea of who's come to the program. Many times it's sons and daughters of people who they're concerned about. Sometimes it's spouses, friends. Older people tend to. I'm an older person. I know I've modified my driving. I drive less at night. I try to avoid driving in stormy weather. I try to wear sunglasses, and I got my cataracts taken care of a couple of years ago so I could see better. Most adults do adjust their driving if we're aware that it's getting risky. But for those that don't or aren't aware, and for whom we have not seen egregious safety issues, it's important to observe changes over time. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, let's hear what this lady says again, please.
I don't feel safe driving anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll go to that. We'll just go to that one. We'll go to that one. Thank you, Jeannie. We'll go to the bottom one. Thanks.
I don't want to drive at night anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's people do say that. And then you've got an opening. So ask the person, what do they feel about driving? Do they have any hesitations? Have they made any changes? Maybe they're already on the right track. They're already open to think themselves for to make changes and to listen to other ideas. So that's good. That's good. Okay, next.
I don't feel
Okay. Now, let's go to, no, let's see. We'll go look at this first, and then we'll look at the handout. Says here, take a look at this. Changes in driving skills usually in later life usually occur gradually. Those of you that are older, you probably have sensed that along some of the lines that I just mentioned. But if you were going to assess someone's driving, as the previous slide ago said, observing, not hearsay, if possible, but actually observing over time, meaning not just taking one ride in the car, and maybe going out under different driving conditions to see if there are patterns, changes, things that occur that are unsafe, but only in certain conditions. That leads you to a different place than taking the car keys away, if simply not driving at night or not driving long distances or whatever might be appropriate. And by observing over time, it helps you not overreact to a single or what could be just a minor incident. So guided or regular observations over time can be very important. So now, as it says, this handout gives you a systematic, objective way to assess driving. So now, Jeannie, would you put up that handout? And those of you that have jumped ahead, it is the handout about warning signs. So as you look at this, this is not something, when we say guided observations, we're not saying get a clipboard, sit next to the driver and go around with them. That probably would not go over too well and would not be wise. But what this offers is, as it says just above the box on the page, observe driving over time, keep notes that will help you understand the changes in driving ability, and also look for a pattern of warning signs and for an increase in frequency. So what I'd like you all to do now, if you have the paper in front of you, mark the paper. And if you don't, mark it mentally as you go down the sheet. And if you could reduce the page a little bit so we can all see the entire page, Jeannie. Just make, yeah. Go down the page yourself, starting with the first column, everybody, and put a circle around any of these warning signs for potential driving behavior that you yourself experience, not the one you came to, unless that's you, not the other person, but yourself. Just take a minute and go through that and circle anyone that you have experienced. Okay. I'm going to ask you to tell. We don't have to share, but we're gonna talk about that in a minute. Now we'll go to the next slide. Back to the slides. So you've marked the things that reflect your own driving. So these may be some of the things that you've marked down. Incorrect signaling, scrapes, decreased confidence while driving. Maybe might not say that per se, but it might be, you might say, well, only at night or only when it's raining or snowing. Failure to notice traffic signals. These are common mistakes, common issues that occur. Let's go to the next one. And then there's more serious ones, perhaps. We see this often on the news. Car goes through a store window from a parking lot. Gas and brake pedal. Well, was it confusion, or was it a loss of good flexible mobility in the leg? Is it bad driving, or is it a physical issue? Getting lost in familiar areas, that can be a pretty serious sign. It was mentioned that I've worked with people with dementia for many years, and that is certainly a sign, a concerning sign, if one cannot find their way home, or cannot find their way to a traditional neighborhood store or something. Not being able to follow highway exits sufficiently, passing the exits all the time. That might be vision. It might be a issue of lack of focus. It may be confusion by distraction. Don't know. Failure to stop at signals or red lights. Whoa, now we're getting really serious, right? So the question is, if you've put any of these down for yourself, what do you make of them? Let's look at the next slide. What do you make of those observations? If the question is, to avoid overreacting, you've got to ask yourself, and this goes back to the warning signs page, because I only asked you to mark what you, some things you've observed, not, as the paper says, when and how often. And that's a big determinant. Is there a pattern? Did it happen once? Have you experienced it several times? So now, if you were to use that same sheet on the person in question, having spent some time to observe their driving, you would want to note on a sheet like this, after you've had your conversation, like I said, not with the writing clipboard. Was it just once? Or is there a pattern? Okay. Were they just minor things, like the items sorted towards the top of the list? Difficulty in turning to see when backing up. That's a physical issue. Maybe a different car with backup warning signals might help. But if it's confusion at exits, if it's car accidents, if it's missing traffic signals, then you're not overreacting to want to rush to have a conversation if you're having some of those serious things. So you have to have some basis, and this checklist is our suggestion as a way of having some objectivity in leading up to your discussion, to determine, for you to determine how serious you think the issues are, and then how serious how urgent the conversation is. So having this documentation, it helps other people understand the situation, particularly if you've got families with several siblings, and there's not any agreement on whether mom's driving is dangerous or not. You have some backup information. Okay, good. Let's go on. So let's see how this conversation goes and what you think of this.
Okay, are you ready to talk about mom's driving?
Okay, I'll go first since I was the first one to take her on a test drive. So I noticed she hit the curb twice when she was parallel parking, and I saw her speeding on Park Drive.
Yeah, I saw her speeding 3 times, but not by much. Twice she was only 5 miles over the speed limit, but once she was 10 miles over. I also noticed she had trouble with that left turn on Oberlin Road. She seemed really stressed.
Well, I feel really stressed when I'm taking that turn too. I mean, everyone in the neighborhood does. So, with all these observations, what are we supposed to do with them? I mean, according to these worksheets, there are no signs that she should stop driving immediately.
Yeah, she actually seems like a pretty safe driver. She just doesn't seem as comfortable driving as she used to.
Yeah, I mean, the traffic in this neighborhood has gotten so much worse. I mean, we just need to discuss options with her for when she doesn't feel safe or comfortable driving.
Yeah, I like that. I just don't know how to bring it up.
Well, we just need to say something like, for the times you're feeling nervous about driving when the traffic is bad, we need to come up with some options to get you where you need to go.
I like that. I just don't know how to bring it up.
No, we just need to say something like, for the times you're feeling nervous about driving when the traffic is bad, we need to come up with a couple of options to get you where you need to go.
Yeah, okay. And then we could talk about how we could drive her, or she could take Uber or Lyft or the senior transportation service.
Yes, but we have to make sure she knows we're not judging her. We just love her and we want her to feel safe.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you should be the one to start the conversation with her. You're better at handling Mom than I am.
Yeah, Mom and me have survived many a difficult conversation. But you need to have a follow-up conversation with her to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, that sounds like a good game plan.
Okay, well, we got a plan. Let's see what we can do.
Wow, great. I want those people in my family, if anybody ever has to talk to me. I don't know how you all felt about that. Let's. I think they presented a lot of good understanding of not overreacting, right? Basing their comments on observations that each of them had. They discussed how to go about having the conversation. Which leads us to part 3, which we'll go back to the slides to talk about part 3 of our 4-part program. We're going to skip the next 2 slides, if you would, for me, Jeannie, just for time. There we go. Now we're going to get to our worksheets and strategies to have a family conversation as productively thought out and planned as that father and daughter did just a moment ago. So let us look at, let's see, let us go to the, Jeannie, I'm making you go back and forth. Go to the next handout, please. Okay. Thank you. You can see how this may be a little hard to see because of the size, but you have it as a reference to work with if you have it in front of you, or and otherwise I'll pull it up and look at it later. That's why this program is presented and usually called a workshop when we do it face-to-face, because we take the time to actually have people work on these and sit in groups and share their this planning once they get to this point, which we're not going to have time for tonight, but you all can do that with your family members, loved ones, friends, as you proceed to pursue your own plans for conversation. So notice that this page is divided into 2 sections, level 1 and level 2, with some boxes in each section. Level 1, as it says at the top, is when driving safety is not an immediate concern. That is, there haven't been any observations about unsafe driving. This is a good time. If you haven't been at that point, it's a good time to have a conversation, because you can set a pattern and set a history of having these conversations, so that if there is at some point a driving safety issue, it's not coming out of the blue. You've already talked about these things. So you'll see in the three columns on this page, who, when, and what. That applies to both levels of conversation. The level one, I think, would be self-explanatory. You're having a conversation. You're trying to find a place and a time and an opportunity to talk about driving. Not talk about safe driving, just talk about driving, including potentially the meaning of driving, or just plain transportation issues or car expenses. But it's level two that poses the most challenges and requires the greater sense of planning, because these conversations result from having used the observation tool and have come to the conclusion that there are some potentially serious driving issues that might require some rather immediate changes in driving, if not totally restricting driving. So we look at this column, the first column under who, under level two. Could be a spouse, could be an adult child. If those people are not available or don't feel comfortable, somebody, an authority figure, police official, that's usually not too helpful. Government official, a business associate, a social contact, somebody from church. It could be a lawyer, somebody that has that the person respects. If you look under characteristics of relationship towards the bottom of the page, person who will be accepted ideally without question to have the person's best interest in mind. Should be a person who knows the person's driving ability, the person who has been involved in the observations, and also a person who knows the health of the individual, because some of the issues that might have resulted in challenging driving might be the result of physical conditions, joint issues, strokes, poor circulation, difficulties with vision. All these things can help determine what kind of changes might have to be made, and some physical and other challenges like that can be addressed, and driving could be improved perhaps. So when do you have the conversation? Well, sometimes if you're looking for an opportunity, maybe if the person has just been to the doctor or had some change in meds, one might say, well, gee, maybe, or otherwise health status, maybe we could talk about driving. Maybe some of these things might suggest limiting driving. We know if you're taking any medications, an awful lot of them say don't drive within a certain number of hours. Some health conditions and changes suggest limiting driving. Getting lost in a familiar place certainly is an occasion, an urgent consideration, just like traffic accidents, car accidents, doctor's visit. Some doctors will ask, and they could be coached or urged to discuss driving with their patients. So what do you talk about in a level 2 conversation? Observations, the meaning of driving, alternative transportation options, the advantages of limiting or stopping driving, which we'll get to when we get to the next section in a few minutes. The risks. Sometimes people who say, I've been driving for 60 years, I'm safe. But then you have to mention, you might choose to mention, well, I don't feel comfortable with my son or daughter, your grandchildren driving with you. You know, I don't want to see them hurt. I don't want to see you hurt. as well as other people out on the road. And the goal of the conversation may be from the beginning, it may be simply a need to restrict driving, or the conversation might lead to that as a proposal. And then, but in worst case scenario, where there's a real danger to life and limb of the driver and others, is the short-term need to stop driving. So let's go to the bottom of the page. There we go. So again, this is workshop setting. This is homework for you all to use if and when you need to have a conversation. There's obviously not a lot of room on that sheet to develop a big plan. You might have several conversations. You might want to plan out some level 1 conversations if you're at that point. And you might want to have a strategy that you put on paper to share with other family members, like the daughter and father there. They sat down together, they looked at some things, and maybe they didn't write it down, but they certainly had a plan. And the more complicated things are, I've always felt, and the older I get, the more I believe it, the more important it is to write some things down. So that's the way that sheet is to be used. So let's go on back to the slides. And because I just dealt with the next several slides, let's go on to slide 26. Jeannie, I'll go along to the next.
You'll have to tell me when I'm there, Charlie. I can't see the slide numbers.
Oh, okay. The next listening activity. Keep going. There you go.
Thank you.
All right, let's hear what they have to say.
Dad, I want to talk to you about your driving, but I'm worried that you're going to think that I'm trying to tell you what to do with your life.
Ah, good approach, right? I'm worried what you're going to think. But, and then what would she do? She'd go on and say, but I'm concerned for your safety. I know driving means a lot to you, but let's talk about, what do you think? And then she'll ask a question. What do you think about your driving? Do you feel safe? Do you have any concerns? Showing some consideration and respect for that he may have already thought about it. So that's some way to approach something like that. Let's go to the next one. Thank you.
I am the only one who gets to decide if I should be driving or not.
Whoa, there's a real challenge, right? Well, Dad, I don't, or Uncle Joe for me, I don't. Of course, you decided you should be driving, but we're all concerned about safe drivers. You know, we see that on the news all the time. You see stories about people not being safe. We don't want to make any decisions for you. We just want to talk about, we've seen some things and they worry us, and we want to know whether you actually noticed anything about your driving. So get into a dialogue and try to find a way to engage the person and not let them think that you're trying to take away the keys. Okay, next one.
Dad,
I am the
actually, let's skip these two, I think, because of time. We'll have similar observations. Let's go to the, let's see, where are we? Yeah, let's listen to this conversation. Thank you.
I really hate to say this, but I don't think Dad should drive anymore. He had a lot of the warning signs on this list.
Which ones did you notice?
Well, the first one for sure. Decreased confidence in driving. He was so nervous making that left turn on Wake Forest Road, he sat through 2 lights.
I definitely noticed number 3, riding the brake, and number 5, other drivers often honk horns. Dad was driving so slow, people were getting frustrated.
But isn't it better to be too slow than too fast?
But that's not even the worst part. He would have rear-ended another car if I hadn't shouted for him to stop.
Your dad used to be such a good driver.
Things change with age. I really think we need to talk to Dad.
I hate this.
So who's gonna do it?
I don't think it should be me. Dad got really defensive when I told him he was driving below the speed limit.
We could have the doctor talk to him. That way it wouldn't feel personal and...
No. Honestly, I think it should be me. I think I should talk to your dad first. He'd take it better from me.
Okay.
And if he doesn't listen to me, maybe you guys can each talk to him separately.
Is we can do that. And if worse comes to worse, we can ask the doctor to talk to him. So, what are you thinking about saying to him?
I'm not exactly sure. Maybe I'll say something about his health and safety.
That sounds great.
This feels so strange. I've been riding in a car with your dad since I was 18.
Wow. You could see several of the important aspects that they brought into their conversation, their observations, their concern about how bad he would feel, the empathy they had for him, the discussion of who's the best person to talk to him. That's a good example of how one would hope things would go in a very caring and connected family. So that's just a reminder of how all the pieces of the planning process can come together and hopefully lead to a good, sensitive and successful conversation and the necessary changes. Okay, Jeannie, we're going to skip a couple of slides again. There we go. Now we're going to go to part 4. Again, I'm trying to be cognizant of the time. And this we mentioned earlier about transportation alternatives. And what needs to happen is ideally, if there does have to be a change, that whoever is involved in the conversation, together with other family members who have done a little research to see how the adjustments can be made to the driving so that the person can get from point A to point B, which is generally a significant issue. Okay, next slide. Some of you may be familiar, I think we're all familiar with, some of you may have used the various Lyft and Uber and whatever that can be accessed through technology. And the can even take away the necessity of having to exchange cash if it's a paid trip. And it also says at the bottom, caregivers can arrange for rides with neighbors, hire people. If you're in an area that has public transportation, knowing the schedules, arranging for a companion to go with the person if they're physically or otherwise not safe necessarily to be out on their own if they're not driving in bad weather or whatever. And maybe can schedule appointments. Family members are not always in a position to do that. And that can be some of the fears that a family member might encounter. Go back towards the beginning of the program when we mentioned about fears. Some of the fears can be, if I raise this, that's going to impact my life. Adult children with kids having busy lives, work lives, and family lives may feel that they don't want to raise this because it's going to impact their lives. So that also has to be addressed. How can they continue to be responsible for their own lives and families and still help the loved ones? So it may not have to all fall on just the family member. I will refer you now to, let's go on to the next page. Let's say alternative transportation service. Let's go to the Jeannie, the next handout. This refers to several, and again, you have this different government and private agencies that might be able to provide resources in the local community. We can go to Page 2, senior centers, retirement communities, caregivers, some church groups, public transportation. There can be a bunch of different options that might provide resources. Let's go to the next handout too, please, Jeannie. These are some pages from the handbook that you will see that can also be very helpful. And these are also in the format of worksheets. Help you look into the possible sources of transportation, of what they provide, how much they would cost, et cetera. So there's 3 pages in the We Need to Talk handbook that you have, 17 to 19 that are worksheets. And Jeannie is going to send out I think to everyone, unless somebody says they don't want it. There's 3 additional worksheets that I've used in other programs, which are, again, tools to help you think about, for the sake of certain types of appointments. Would it be family members, friends, private services, mass transit? How would somebody get from point A to point B? And how would you go about acquiring those services? And another sheet that talks about how often gives you a chance to really log how often, what time of day certain types of transportation required. Are they weekly, monthly? Are there appointments? Are there church services, social activities, concerts? What are the things that the person might need some help getting to if they're not driving 100% of the time, or if they have to give up driving completely? Worksheets can be very helpful in planning things like that. Okay, let's go back to the slides, please. And we'll go to the one that has the conversation. This one again. Let's see. That may not, let's see, that is a video. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Dad, why don't we take the bus downtown and avoid parking?
I don't like the bus. It's just so loud and crowded.
I know, but I don't like parking downtown. It's getting harder and harder to find a space near your doctor. Let's just give it a try.
Okay, all right. Let's give it a try then.
Okay, come on.
Dad, got a second?
Hey, sure.
I was just going through the paperwork about your car. You know, with insurance, gas, and maintenance, I really think you could save hundreds of dollars if you sold your car.
Are you sure about that?
Here, take a look at this. This is the total cost of your annual insurance, gas, and maintenance of your car. Then look at this. This is the cost of using a rideshare once a day, 365 days a year.
This is an interesting point. Are you sure the numbers are right?
Yeah. Here's the math. And this doesn't even factor in things like parking.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Oh, there you are.
Sorry, I'm so late. The traffic was terrible.
I was worried about you.
I just saw. I had 3 missed calls from you. I don't answer the phone while I'm driving.
Well, I'm so glad you don't answer your phone while you drive. You know, if you use the ride-sharing app, I'll be able to see exactly where you are without calling you. And you wouldn't have to deal with traffic.
It's true. I can sit in the back seat and catch up on my reading.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
That would be fun.
I think you would.
It will.
There we go. Another beautiful conversation with smiles. that's the way we all hope it will go. Might not be that easy for everybody, but these people did their homework. They looked into alternatives. They planned their conversation, and they found an angle that the father would appreciate, because he's always wanted to be careful with his money. He might still not want to sell it tomorrow. He might want to keep it for a few more weeks and get out there and wash it and polish it when the sun comes out in the summertime. But he'll probably go along with it because he's interested in saving money. And one of the pages in the workbook is a transportation cost worksheet. That's what she's referring to. She's used that as a tool. So I refer you again to the workbook. It has a lot more pages than we refer to during the presentation, but that's where all these things I hope will be very helpful to you. So I think that conversation is a good place to conclude the presentation. You have the handbook, which has several other topics in it that were not covered during the presentation. So I hope for those of you that are been concerned about safe driving for yourself or someone else, now has some more tools, some helpful tools that will lead you to proceed to understanding if and when and how to have a conversation about driving and make the changes necessary without, while showing some sensitivity, respect to the person in question who might have to make the driving changes. And hopefully, if you're thinking about the emotions involved, some of this will help you overcome any fears you might have and any anxiety that you might have been facing or think you might encounter when that conversation time comes about. So I thank you again, and I thank AARP for the chance for me to present this to you. And if we do have time for questions, or if any have occurred in the chat box, I'd be happy to stay on a few more minutes.
There is nothing in the chat, Charlie.
Okay. Everybody's still there?
Some people are still here, but not everybody.
If anybody,
okay,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Charlie.
No, I was going to say, if anybody does have a question to ask, you just unmute yourself and feel free to ask or comment.
All right, I think hearing none, I'll go ahead and wrap us up for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us for We Need to Talk. Charlie, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope the rest of our participants did as well. For the folks who are still with us, we have lots of other virtual programming coming up, and you can see all the different things we're doing on the AARP website at aarp.org/NH. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.